problem. Right there with you.
Okay, we're back in session, and we will move on to Dan Bond's presentation now.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're going to jump over from the red line discussion to the future growth side of this whole discussion. So on the screen here is kind of an overview. You can see the core of the City of Selma here, and we have identified four kind of major growth areas, primarily spurred by proposed development and inquiries that we've had over the last many years. We've got the east side sewer, as we're calling it, which is primarily serving the proposed Amberwood development. Amberwood's about 60% of this growth area. To the north, calling again the north side sewer, would be served by a line in Dinuba Avenue and serves essentially the whole north side of the future city growth area up to Manning Avenue. Then on the west side, we've got, again, we're calling it the northwest sewer. This is primarily spurred by the Selma Grove proposed development, as well as expansion beyond that to the park and such around the basin there. And then we also have interest on the what we're calling the west side by a number of developers in this zone. And each of these areas needs infrastructure on the sewer side to allow the development. We're not, just extending an 8-inch main a couple hundred feet more to serve these guys. We've got to put in big pipes. In some cases, upgrade existing pipes to larger sizes in order to allow this development to occur. Go ahead on next slide, please. So we'll start with the east side, or primarily serving Amberwood as the driver. This line that's required to get the development rolling on this side starts with a 48-inch connection into the trunk main, and then the reason for that 48 is it allows future expansion to the east for future development. But for now, a 24-inch main is proposed to run through the industrial park and loop up through the Amberwood development up to Floral Avenue, because the first development that's been discussed is in that Floral corridor.
So it's 24 to start with on the main. Where does the 48 come in?
The 48's just, if you look on the screen there, just where the laser pointer is, there's just a short stretch there. I believe it's a little under 500 foot of 48-inch pipe. And that would be stubbed to the east for future development that would occur in that direction to allow for that additional flow. So when the master plan first came forth, I said back in probably 2015, we started looking at this, and it originally had a much larger main running somewhere in this zone to serve both sides of the future development, and we looked at that as being kind of a cost prohibitive detriment to development. So we worked with SKF and ultimately with the Amberwood developer to come up with a solution where instead of putting in large mains all the way through now, we started with a short stub at the end. This development out here is so far in the future, it doesn't make sense to burden the current developer with those undue costs. So we came up with a plan to split that line and make it,
So a couple phases, as they're talking about doing, you don't really need the 48-inch main, is that right?
Correct. Just
24 is adequate.
Just that very first piece, so that it doesn't cause an undue burden on future development. So yeah, they're proposing, I want to say it's a little over 2 miles of 24-inch line to get up to the Floral section, and then the developer of that piece would take care of any additional infrastructure required to serve their specific subdivisions. All the costs that you see on the screen here are taken strictly from the master plan document. We haven't tried to cost estimate anything any further, but we're showing an estimated construction cost on this of about $4.6 million.
And if that development changes hands down the line and it does get built out, whose responsibility would it then be to put in the larger pipe?
Well, This pipe is all that's needed to serve the area that's defined as its service area.
The entire service area?
Yes. So in the future, if development starts to occur, out in the east here, they would be responsible to pipe it into the 48-inch at the bottom end.
So whoever develops it outside of that service area, outside the Amberwood service area, would be responsible for reimbursing the city for those costs, if there's a reimbursement agreement?
Well, it wouldn't be for reimbursement. It would be, they would be in.
The developer
they
would be
have
paying
to-
it.
They would have to pay to put the pipes in the ground. And then the city responsibility would be for taking care of managing any reimbursement agreements so that, that developers are starting on the bottom end, get reimbursed for oversizing and putting in.
So that there's something in writing to reimburse the developers who started it.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah, so in this case, they're starting out with a 48-inch pipe here, and this 24-inch main. You have one, generally, well, for lack of a better term, a master developer building out most of this. We will have to set up some sort of reimbursement agreement or zone of benefit so that that developer is reimbursed as other developers tap onto that line and reap the benefit of their expense.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Real quick then.
Certainly.
This, right, all this is proposed, right?
That is what is proposed in their current plan. They do have an approved plan. I believe they're
Right.
anticipating starting
So,
next year.
and you're saying this is our industrial park right here?
Correct.
So right now, what's the current sewer for the industrial park right now? Does it run this way or what?
Pass that on to you, Veronica. I don't remember.
I mean, is that connecting or just
No, it's
a
not.
parallel sewer being put in?
Yeah, no, it's not connecting. The industrial park ties into the interceptor main, so it kind of flows south and then west and ties into the interceptor. But that sewer is only for that local area. It's not oversized or.
So if the industrial park grows or something, it's not going to, say in the future, that is put in? Is the industrial park, they won't tap into it?
The current industrial park, as it lies now, there's actually services for all the parcels there, so they would just need to put a clean out in and build their building and pay fees. I mean, so that whole park already has sewer service, and that was developed, I don't know, it's probably quite a few years ago.
Yeah. Could you, can
Oh,
you
I'm
kind
sorry.
of show me where it, more or less how it goes?
Okay, cool. Well, this one's, okay. So, if my memory serves me correct, I believe the cul-de-sacs come out into, I'm not sure what this alignment is,
Specific.
specific, and I think that it cuts, there's like an easement here, and it cuts through, and then it ties into the interceptor line. So all this has sewer in it already.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Yeah, just to reiterate that the industrial area is served by a much smaller pipe, just enough to serve that. It was built before this master planning process went on and before Amberwood opted to run that pipe through their development. There were, many alternatives looked at as far as the alignments for that pipe. And many of them actually were out in this zone originally and weren't intended to run through and serve that area.
I don't know. Teresa, that industrial park isn't going to grow, right? Isn't going to expand. They don't have any, city doesn't have any more land or anything. Is there any possibility that the industrial park itself getting bigger?
There is still vacant space there for the industrial park to grow into, but beyond, once that came to capacity, the zoning on the contiguous area to the east, do you know what that is? We'd have to check what the zoning on that is, but it could expand if the zoning.
Well, I'm
is-
just wondering if hypothetically, if it does expand,
Yes, we could rezone it. I just was wondering what the plans were.
no, I'm just saying, say it is rezoned, right? Where is that park, if it's already at capacity for what's currently designed, where would that park hypothetically connect to? Would it be that Amberwood one going down there? Would it handle that?
The blue line
so.
here is the service area
Mm-hmm. Okay.
for this line. So if additional development were occurring in here, that is planned for in the capacity of this line. So they would connect into that line, and they would be paying fees to reimburse the initial
Yeah, right.
developer.
Okay, thank you.
Just for a little more understanding of why it goes through that line. Again, he touched base on it. It was actually coming out more east, but then you have to go into land acquisition and things of that nature, where it now costs more for the project. So trying to control those costs, it's easier to try and go through roads and things like where you can dig it up and repave it and things of that nature, instead of coming further out where you don't have roads, you have farmland. Now you have easements, you have to purchase the land, you have things of that nature where rise that cost.
Okay. Any more questions on this specific side, or can we go on to the next one? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Okay, I'm just trying to make this clear for me. S31/32, we're looking at that as the project name, correct?
The-
That red line there on estimated cost, construction cost? And then we're looking at estimated capital cost, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this line here is what we're looking to have to put in for the Amberwood project?
The Amberwood's actually putting the pipe in themselves.
Okay, I get that. But my question is where are we with this project to start? I mean, we've been talking about 2015, we're going on 2020.
Amberwood is the driver on this. They have actually processed the plans to build this sewer through the city, and those plans are approved. The most recent discussions I've heard is that they're talking about starting in March. That date's been floating a bit, but that's the latest information we have.
March of 20.
Yeah, March of 20.
Okay.
And there's no
Reimbursement agreement on that. Amberwood is defraying all those costs themselves for putting the line in.
I don't believe we have an agreement in place yet, but they are looking for a zone of benefit to be set up for that.
For future development, so that other landowners that benefit from the sewer lines that they're putting in have to reimburse them for their
Correct.
costs. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
But that agreement isn't in place yet.
No, it's not. And just to follow up on your question, these various designations, S31, S32, the SKF master plan document actually has all of these capital improvement projects identified with these specific, so that these correlate directly to the master plan and how those are broken out.
So I have a question real quick in regards to that. Because of the fact that SKF has that already master plan factored in the cost, does the city have any impact or any knowledge in regards to future reference in regards to charging impact fees? Or have you guys been speaking in regards to that?
I think we're going to go into that
Okay.
in the later portion, but there has been quite a bit of discussion about reassessing our impact fees for sewer specifically.
Yeah, at a later slide, I'll actually identify what those projects are that are in the Nexus report.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so this next slide covers North Side Sewer, or also known as the Dinuba Sewer. This project has actually been designed, and we attempted to go through a CFD process to fund construction. This really lends into the discussion that Kira talked about as far as kind of leapfrog development. Most of the development that's really pushing or driving this is on the tail end. It's on the east side of this development. We had some subdivisions over in this area. We've got V5 at McCall and some other development in the area. But we've got a lot of pipe to put in ahead of it at a very substantial cost. And that's been kind of the kicker on this particular one, is that we don't have a lot of pressure on development on this side of the system. So we're looking to build a very long and costly pipeline to serve development that's primarily on the east end of this project at this time. So that's this particular project. We're looking at, actually looks like we've got a total problem here. Upwards of over $4 million to put that entire pipeline in.
That color, not the green, the other color, is that county Is that county property, or is that city limits?
I believe that area is in the county, yes.
So what's the significant change of color there? What does that represent?
No, the difference there is that in that area, there's already a smaller pipeline, so that's just designated as a separate project because in the SKF master plan, it's designated as a parallel pipeline versus this being a solely new pipeline.
So-
That's the only differentiation.
If I may go back and forth, Veronica, what are the, what's the thought process in regards to that color part, in regards to our future growth? Do you guys, what are you proposing? Are you guys thinking that if we, the city, are developing, let's say Raven Development wants to develop, we're gonna have to put in the green, and I'm using that green lime color. In order to change, do we have to change that color to meet capacity, or is that color?
Yeah, the color has no significance. Through these various slides, we used colors just mostly to differentiate between types of projects and sizes of pipelines.
Okay, so what's the size of pipe on that?
That's a 27-inch.
And what's the size of the one in the green? 27
They're
also?
both 27,
Both 27?
yes.
And you're stating that we're gonna have to make it substantially larger?
No,
Because of the
there's
development?
there's no pipe there now.
That's proposed.
This is proposed. All that I'm talking about is future growth and new pipelines, not.
Expansion.
They're all proposed.
That's all proposed?
That's all proposed.
None of it has been hooked?
No, these pipes do not exist today. This is what we need to be placed in
Gotcha.
order to allow capacity for future growth. This project has a mix of city and county. The westerly portion, there is county over here. As we get over into this zone this is all in the city currently.
So knowing that, and I'm just throwing it out there, I'm just having a discussion, I'm not innuendos. Knowing that we do need development, or we do need sewer line there, the emphasis was for Amberwood come around the back through the industrial park. But knowing that we need development on this side of town, the northern side, could we just go through there and all the way and hit Amberwood also?
In order to do that, I mean,
Because you went from a 47, 45 to a 25 or 40, I don't know.
right, but to serve
Right?
this area.
And if we
might-
just went a 50 complete or 40, I'm just started throwing numbers.
we
I'm
might
not
be
the
into an
expert.
84 now. I mean,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
try
yeah.
and do that. And there's a major canal crossing that would have to be taken into effect. You'd have to look at the elevations and what can and can't be served. It may require a lift station to make that happen. There's a lot that goes into sewer design.
What I'm doing is, right now, we're actually talking about the future. We're talking about what's cost effective, and you guys are the experts.
Right.
I'm throwing that out there, but knowing that we don't have any line at all. wouldn't it
Well,
be an
there's
open-
no line for Amberwood
Yeah.
either.
That's what I'm saying.
right.
Wouldn't it be an open discussion? But that's something, that's future reference.
Right. But again, that piggybacks on this kind of this leapfrogging discussion. If we were to try and have Amberwood put in now, say, an 84-inch line, they would have no way to recover that cost in a reasonable amount of time to make it affordable. It would be a project killer for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't even discuss that.
Right, right. So we've got to, the way these are laid out is based on, number one, the master plan, and the master plan is based on logical progression of development and logical progression of how
So-
these areas can be served.
So I get to get to the meat of all the question here. I mean, we could go over propose and what's our logic and what's what. Well, basically, right now, we've been stuck for quite some time. And so when we start talking about what's logic and what's actually foreseeable and what's actually happening, they don't meet eye to eye. So as our engineer, do you feel that we as a city have done all that's adequate enough to do for the future development of our city as a council?
Well, that's kind of a tough question to answer. I mean, development has to occur with people. Developers have to come forth, propose projects, and find a way to fund that project. We, as a city, are could be in a, if we build it, they will come kind of mentality, but we've got to find the money to build it.
So we haven't developed because our developers haven't come to us?
Well, we do have a serious infrastructure issue, and serious to the degree of, millions and millions of dollars that have.
And that's because we haven't planned accordingly.
Well, the planning is in place now, but historically was not.
And in regards to the planning being now, there's a financial burden towards that.
Absolutely.
There's always going to be a number.
Yes.
And we know that there are wanting developers wanting to come in the community, but those developers know that there's an influx of money that's actually going to be put a burden on them.
Correct.
And it has to do with, in a joint venture, understanding that it's not SKF's fault, it's not the city. It partially could be SKF's part, partially could be the city's because of the lack of future development thought process. So those developers either come to us asking with a need of wanting what they would love to have and what they need. So our job, as you, the engineer, and our job, us as the legislators, to find the money, we need to come to a common ground. So when we throw these hypothetical questions in regards to what if we went from Dinuba and did Amberwood and Raven, I know it sounds logic and it sounds crazy, but at the end of the day, we're sitting here because of, typically, we as the legislators haven't been doing our job probably in the last 20 years or haven't done enough. And you're our engineer, so we need to put an emphasis in the regards to what we can do to move the proposed projects and think of what we could do to help our developers and our city come together in that growth, right? So Dinuba, this here is a very important part. It is our future growth. So what can we do? What do you think in your capacity of reviewing it, what would be your proposed project for this part of town?
Well, we've actually already designed this project. We had approved plans, authorized by the previous council 3 or 4 years ago, I believe. And we went through the process of trying to fund it, and it failed.
What were the process you did to?
It was a CFD. And again, Isaac will go over that process in more detail as far as what occurs there, but it's essentially a bonding process that puts the cost burden on the landowners impacted by the facility. And then as future growth occurs, that growth would pay in to reimburse the original group.
So if the bond failed,
I think to clarify, not all property owners in the end chose to participate.
Gotcha.
So
that's better.
It's
That answers.
the formation of the structure failed is what happened, not just the bond itself. The CFD structure failed due to a voting requirement.
So again, to try and maybe answer your question further, is each of these projects that we're showing are strictly based on the master plan, which has gone through in-depth analysis as far as the best route for sewer pipes, proper sizing for the service areas involved. But they do change. If a development all of a sudden, gets proposed, in an outlying portion that isn't served by the master plan very well as it is today, then we have to step in and look for solutions, as we did on Amberwood. Even when this master plan was published in 2016, it is different than what it is shown here today. Things have changed. We worked with the developer, SKF. Everyone was involved in finding a solution to make the project serve the area that was needed, as well as make it the most cost-effective to actually allow development to move forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We can go ahead and jump to the next slide. So this area here, it's not labeled on the exhibit, but this is our northwest sewer. Again, this is being driven primarily by the Selma Grove project, as well as just the master plan and needs in the area. Again, the colors are not significant to red, or these are all proposed lines, and the colors generally demonstrate segments of pipe and different pipe sizes. We're showing a total cost to build this out. Again, I think we may have some errors on this. I believe this was a much larger number. Northwest, yeah, well, no, I guess it is correct. About $3.6 million to build this out. And that, again, that doesn't build out the entire system. We're showing the service area here that it ultimately serves, but additional infrastructure would be required to serve, you know, the most northwesterly portion. This is enough to build out the piece that we've got the most interest in right now with specific proposed projects. And again, there's about a little over $3.5 million price tag to make that happen.
Did you use prevailing wage?
This is all, again, yeah, this is based on SKF's numbers, and those would all be prevailing wage numbers. This project does include some, I believe, some upsizing. The portion here that is in red, coincidentally, is an upsize that would be required to allow the capacity needed for the expansion area. Questions on this one? Go ahead, Raina. And then lastly, what we're calling the West Sewer. We've had a number of developers and several meetings on primarily residential development that's wanting to occur in this area. We do have a tentative map on this piece here, as well as interest in a number of other housing and both multifamily and single-family residential in this zone, as well as, I believe, event center and other things in this area. This one, again, another coincidental red line. This piece down here needs to be upsized as part of the ultimate capacity requirement to serve this system. And a lift station will likely be required somewhere in this zone to serve anything further to the west. I'm sure you all have driven this and know that it drops off right as you get past Highway 43. This one, we've got a price tag of $860,000 for construction to get that pipe out to this point here to service those folks. You know, we've had several meetings with this group, and it's the leapfrogging effect. We do have some upsizing infrastructure costs here and here that are burdensome to the first guy going in, and that's where we're having issues, is the first guy doesn't want to spend all the money because there's not an obvious, you know, there's no guarantee the next guy is going to come in and be able to repay him quickly. So we've tried to help facilitate putting a group together to share the costs and get this moving forward, but thus far it's stalled out. Questions on this zone?
What's
Way to facilitate the, you know, the first developer, to get that developer paid back? What are some of the mechanisms? Are we getting to that in the next presentation?
That'll, yeah, be covered in, that's probably the most appropriate time, because there will be a lot of potential options brought out, and I think it'll be an easier discussion.
That seems to be a major stumbling block to the installation of these sewer lines.
Absolutely.
Dan, I have a quick question.
Sure.
This right here, you saying that is upsize project right here?
Correct.
So this looks pretty existing. I thought you were talking about, you know, future growth. Why does this need to be upsized?
This piece here is the downstream pipeline that this feeds into. And as this area builds out, it'll put serious constraints on this. This pipeline will not be able to serve the capacity required for this entire area. So this pipe needs to be upsized to allow for the additional capacity.
So this, okay, perfect.
The next, sorry, I didn't wear my glasses here. That's S08. S8 is actually on the next slide. It's in the third group here, S8. I actually have these in red intentionally, as those are replacement pipelines. And S8 has a price tag of estimate of almost $229,000 to upsize 848 lineal feet to 18-inch pipeline, and that's to provide the capacity needed for that additional expansion to the west. So this exhibit here is just a summary of what you've seen on the past slides. These same numbers were shown on each individual slide with the maps behind them. So this is just a summary so you can see all the costs that we're talking about. So I mean, we're looking at upwards of 8, 12, 13, almost $14 million worth of sewer infrastructure that would be needed to allow the initial expansion of all of these areas.
And following that, those little red lines would go away when SKF delivers their reports. Is that correct?
Which red lines?
All those little red lines in the middle of the town, or is this
No.
just for future
This
growth?
is
those-
just future growth.
This is not to clean out existing lines, or to.
No.
This is not for R&R at all.
No, this is.
Those are the only ones that connect that actually put an adverse effect on, if you
Yeah,
bring the future development, it adds adverse because of the streamline, correct?
Yeah, the only red lines we're showing, I've got 4 projects identified here, are due to capacity growth. Those
So-
lines are not big enough to handle the flow from the expanded service
So if
areas.
we had, and you're saying that this was already, these projects are, they've been on our general plan and, right? It may, I may be wrong, but couldn't we have used some of our CDBG funds to actually take care of some of these red lines that we're talking in regards to?
From the capacity side,
Yeah. Because I know a while
sewer,
back.
sewer pipelines are definitely eligible for CDBG. I would have to discuss that with their representative, because if they're used as a capacity increaser, that.
But isn't it existing? It's not right now at capacity, it's existing. Once we start developing, it becomes, it becomes future development, isn't it true?
Again, I'd have to, what's that?
Okay, so hypothetically, when you came to us and you told us, here's a list of all the projects you can actually do, but here's the list that the city council has approved.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was infrastructure.
Oh, yeah, no, sewer
So-
definitely does apply to,
So you said that, and you said in the past that when we do future development and we incorporate it logically,
Mhm.
we would be able to get more bang for our buck, theoretically.
yeah, now, a project like this, where we're replacing a specific stretch of pipe,
I understand that, but
it's within the realm of the funding that we receive. We get approximately $230,000 annually from CDBG, so the larger projects that we're talking about would not be viable for
Well, so
CDBG funding.
I understand that. But right now, looking at 386,000 and 498,000 in 2 to 3 years, to 4 years, we could have had it taken care of already, correct?
Again, I'm not 100% certain that new expansion would be viable for
Okay,
CDBG
okay,
funding.
okay,
I just don't know with that
Okay,
absolute
and I'm
certainty,
not,
so.
and I'm not asking you to, what I'm trying to say is that, as, we got to look for all mechanisms to finance this. And if we're going to be talking about the next 5, we were talking about it 5 years ago, and we were sitting here, we want to replace some sidewalk, but at the same time, in order to enhance our future development and use, what's the bigger bang for our buck for our CDBG, along with seeking some new financing, it's something to think about.
I agree, and I will get that answer for you.
Okay.
And I don't know that I have anything further. If there's any more questions of me?
Just to wrap it up, to kind of go back to SKF as well, all the red lines talking about the service, SKF is going to be undergoing the process of nailing that down, right, what needs to be done within the city to increase capacity. Let me ask you a question. Can SKF go in there and clean out those lines, and will that increase the capacity and remove or remediate those red lines? What could be done to make that situation better on an infill basis?
Yeah, I mean, as far as info goes, cleaning the lines doesn't give us more capacity. Those lines are probably, we're not going to see any more development on that core of the city. So I think those are all just strictly R&R. We just need to get in there and figure out what kind of project to put together. And again, we do have some projects already, planned
It wouldn't be
out.
to clean it out, it'd be to increase capacity, is that right? Because of the number, or would it actually be in there to service those lines? Or
Yeah.
you just don't know yet?
All we do is we're just O&Ming and R&Ring those lines.
Okay.
So
And
you
then,
said in the-
We're
Pardon
not
me, just
expanding
one last
those
question.
existing lines.
But I haven't seen, I know we've been talking about how we can't grow because of the sewer, but I've never seen a project, an infill project, turn down. Like the apartment, the 20-unit project at McCall and Nelson, that went through. I mean, I got a will-served letter. So it's not like, what's the difference here? You can still build and do infill projects in the city of Selma. City of Selma is not closed for business, right? New construction on an infill basis. Where does
Infill's fine.
SKF play a role in that?
We're generally good with
Or the
infill.
pipes, I should say. Where do the sewer lines play a role in that?
Yeah, generally infill, we don't have capacity issues. The plant has capacity and the pipes generally have capacity. It's expanding outside the.
It's these projects that you just talked about.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And
That's
I want to
what-
make sure that we've got a lot of red lines floating around and they've been kind of, there's times where
That doesn't mean stop development when
No,
we
it
see
doesn't.
that. It's not a stop sign for
No.
infill.
No,
or danger.
the exhibit that Veronica went over had, every color from green to red and varying
be
shades in
any color.
between.
It's
And
arbitrary.
those were strictly based on risk assessment. The green lines were generally new pipes in areas that, they've been put in with PVC pipe and recent development and don't have any issues
So-
on them. Other pipes, as they started to turn orange and pink and various colors, and those were based on degrees of risk assessment, not all because they're broken or clogged or anything like that. It can be where they're located, their age, the pipe material, how often they need to be serviced, if there's a sag in the line. There's a lot of different indicators.
A lot
as
of
to
different
why those-
factors that
Right.
determine the color.
So that's one series of red lines. The I think confusion point is there's other red lines on other exhibits that are just a few pipes that need to be upsized in order to allow capacity expansion as you go outside the existing core of the city.
So I want to just say something.
Sure.
I just really quick. So there's no danger. So we don't have nothing to be worried about. So we're okay.
I'm sorry, I said danger, and I didn't, I shouldn't
Because
say that.
you're our engineer, and you look really comfortable.
Reel that back in.
You look really comfortable explaining to me that there's no problem.
I'm not saying that there's no problems.
No, you're
There's-
saying that we're okay and that we can move on and future development, and we could put our emphasis financially on somewhere else because SKF's doing a great job, and they are doing a great job, and we don't have to worry about that part.
Well, okay, SKF is the primary responsibility for operations and maintenance, and
But you're our engineer.
I am your engineer. I don't know everything about every pipe because I'm not
Well,
privy to
then,
that level of information.
today we are here sitting here because we were told about red lines. No one explained to us the actual biggest time, the most important part of the red line. And after I've gone through with SKF, I've realized that they are doing their job.
Yes, they
and
are.
that we as a city have to do our part.
Mm-hmm.
And you're our engineer, so if you're here telling me that there is a little bit of emphasis and importance in regards to those red lines, because I don't know what else to name them,
Sure.
and we understand that the infill in the city of Selma can be completed because there are open sewer lines, and we're open for business in that part. And the outer it's a concern, the outer,
Correct.
liability-wise. But going back to the little red lines, that I wish somebody else would give me a name of it so I can not name it red lines. High risk.
Or risk
The hi-
assessment, yeah.
Okay, the high risks. We don't have, after all this presentation, do we have to be concerned about it or not?
Well, that's where the SKF capital improvement plan comes in, is they're annually looking at these.
So our city engineer and we should not be looking at it. We should be just looking at you, Veronica, and asking you what your capabilities and what our concerns should be.
Yeah, I like it when you look at the city, but yes, my preference is to connect with the city and, just making sure we have that open line of communication. But, we're responsible for the operation and maintenance of the existing system. Little info projects, they're not going to break the back. They're in the city. We need to serve them. It's just that everything inside, the larger trunk mains, not those little, not the alleys. Think about those. The larger trunk mains are at capacity. So the master plan addresses the build out of the city beyond the city limits. So
And
that's why most of that is new infrastructure. There's only a few upgrades.
Yeah, and just FYI, the reason why we've asked this meeting, or Mayor Pro Tem Michael, is to get clarity. And you guys might, squint your eyes and say, look, well, why are you asking that question? Well, we're getting informed and we're getting educated. And that's part of the first part of it becoming, understanding, having a better relationship with SKF and our staff. And if our staff sits here for 3 to 4 hours and sees us asking these questions, maybe they start feeling that there is a concern and there is we need to become a little more,
I think the councilman raises a really valid viewpoint too, that even beyond that, we answer to the people. And we've had these meetings where, there have been those red lines and there's a perception that it's almost closed for business and we can't develop and we're done and it's all because of sewer. Really, we're getting a nuanced understanding of that today, and we have been in the last period of time. And Selma's not closed for business, and it's going to be, really kind of liberating in order, and really our job to be able to communicate what we find out today, from staff and from SKF to the citizens, that those presentations that we have about the interior of the city, it just it's a technical description of the lines. It doesn't mean that we're in danger of a spill. It doesn't mean we can't develop more fully on an infill basis. It just refers to the condition of the pipes, and that's why you pay your fees to SKF. You were saying that it's in the O&M and the R&R, that those pipes will be looked at and cleaned up, but it's not really materially affecting business or development within the city. It's the outer areas that we just can't serve right now because there are no pipes up there, right? So that gives us a better way of explaining it to the people we represent, and that's what I think a really good goal that we're getting met today with this workshop.
Yeah, no, 100% accurate in everything you said.
Yeah, just to touch base a little bit more on that too as well. So the projects that come through as far as the inner city, and maybe people have been here longer, Veronica, I've never seen one turned down as far as a sewer problem. There's always the communication. We all come together and say, how do we make this project work, right? So through that process, we say, okay, you have a line here. Is that where that process needs to work or go through? Do you tap in here, or do you tap into another or pipeline somewhere else and make that connection? So that's part of the internal conversation, maybe through our PRC meetings and through the development process of how we get that to go through. So an inner city project, the system is there. The open lots and things of that nature. A good example of that is, I think it was Mr. Nagra. He just brought in that 10 homes within the inner city on Pine Street. And at no point do we say, okay, we can't serve that. It's we need you to connect at this point to get that connection point through that process. And this is how we need to kind of get it designed to get that project going through. So that's a good example where you have a project that's inner city that we didn't sit there and say, well, we have sewer issues. We can meet those demands working together. We just need that to be connected in this format, in this structure. I hope that answers your question. So if there's no other any other questions, we'll move on to.
I just wanted to add a short thing, because I work in a lot of other jurisdictions and have worked in other jurisdictions. I just want to make a quick distinction. Everywhere you go, developers pay. They pay for their development to connect to sewer. But the issue that's different in Selma is that they usually connect to a system that has capacity for them. And in this case, the lines that are within city limits don't have the capacity to add more to them. So if you're outside of the limits, you're not just tying in, per se. You're not just coming in. That's why the length of the lines that you see for the new development are so long. I mean, Amberwoods is, so long. And then you see for Raven, it's across the whole top of the city, because you're not just, okay, I'm in. You're going a great distance because there's no capacity to tie into once you're outside.
SKF came in and cleaned all the pipes out and did their O&M and their rehab. It still wouldn't be enough capacity, right? There would still need to be a new system.
Yeah,
that
you're
would
going
have to
from
be
an
put in.
8-inch or 16-inch
Yeah,
to
it's just at
48.
capacity. So
Yeah.
for additional population, we
Yeah.
need new sewer lines.
Yeah, that's just the difference here that I think we might need
So
to put
Veronica,
in
I have a
perspective.
question. I'm not going to beat you up, okay? So in regards to Kingsbird and Fowler, they're part of our team, SKF. When they're developing, they have to, I work for builders, so my trucks are at both communities. What did they do different 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago in regards to their capacity and their new development that they're doing that we didn't do? And I just ask you that, not because I'm picking on anybody and not because but because of just the future growth.
I mean, I think it would just
'Cause you have
only
diff-
be my opinion. I'm not sure what,
Well, I'm not
all their paneling processes are, but they grow a lot. They're a lot smaller. So they have infrastructure in place that still has capacity.
And
then
that
also-
infrastructure, was it built by the city or built by SKF?
Well, I mean, I really don't know. I know when I started here, it was already in. So, but they also grow a lot slower. The projects are a lot smaller. And they have built new sewers, and they've tied into existing. So just their system's a little bit, I mean, their pipe size is a little bit larger, so they can, do an extension and continue extending on. But they don't have a lot of projects. I mean, I don't think they have well, maybe they do, but they're just in like closer proximity to sewer lines with capacity.
Okay, thank you.
In regards, going back to the infill in the city, I understand that we have capacity for the vacancy there. But I just want to be sure that we as a group or council doesn't nonchalantly say, oh, they just chose the color red and high risk just means slightly higher call for service, because the reality is many of those pipes are coming to the end of their life. And if we fall in the trap of taking a nonchalant, everything's okay approach to it, in 5, maybe 10 years, all of a sudden we're going to have several streets start to fail because we didn't take the effort to address and plan for it now. So I understand we have, for all the infill, there is capacity, but at the same time, I mean, high risk means something. It's just, why don't you call it low risk? So we can't just say, oh, it's okay, we're good, if they just use the color red. We just still got to be mindful on how we address those in the future. Okay. Go ahead, Isaac.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the money. Just to be clear on how the formats work as far as collection of fees, impact fees, or whatever you want to clarify or classify them as. SKF has their own structure as a fee structure as far as repairs and maintenance, connection fees and things of that nature. The city itself has one fee for when it comes to the sewer, and that's called the development impact fee. Just a brief understanding of what that is. Impact fees are fees imposed to a property developer by municipality, the city, for a new infrastructure that must be built to increase due to new property development. It could be commercial, residential, whatever it may be. These fees are designed to offset the impacts of additional development and residentials for municipalities' infrastructures and services. Examples are sewer, water, things of that nature. So how do these work? Okay, so a development impact fee is supported in a sense, just like the rest of our fee structures, right? You have to have a supporting document. You can't just say, hey, I want to charge you $20 for doing this. No, the city and municipality has to be able to say, I'm charging you $20, but this is why. Okay, so a development impact fee structure, it develops a nexus report, and it's for a multiple array of different items. But for the discussion today, we'll talk about this slide here. This is a page directly out of our nexus report for the calculation of what is collected. In this sense, it's called wastewater, but it's sewer, of an array of projects that built up that for future growth. Remember, development impact fees, one caveat I want you to understand is, can only pay for new. It can't pay for repairs and maintenance. It can't pay for upgrades. It can really only pay for new lines, new projects themselves, okay? So you can see that we go through an array of projects when this project was built. This report was actually adopted back in 2015. So during that process, they looked at an array of projects that for sewer infrastructure, and you can see that you have a WC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a lot of these projects you can see are outlining where they identified those projects are and the estimated cost of those projects. So the multiple of these projects, there's a good chunk of them that actually are on the east side, really referring to the Amberwood project per se, that area. Some of them are one's McCall line, things of that nature. Another one is on the Danube line. So how an impact structure is actually developed is you come to the table and you say, okay, what projects do you have in your general plan as what do you see as your future growth? Let's talk about the projects that are now coming. Who's coming to the table? What do you see out there? And so when they develop the report, they basically talk about those projects. And so So you can see they came up with a total project line of 24 million. Okay, so what they do now is they turn around and say, when in those developments, how many homes are there, how many acreage, how many developments, how many this and that, and they come to a calculation on how they divvy up that project. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, please. So when you go through the project, you make that calculation, you go into a categorize of different zones, low density, medium density. Basically, the understanding is it commercial? Is it an apartment complex? What is that mechanism? So you take those items, you divvy it out into those projects, and you come up with a rate structure. Okay? As part of the development and the adoption of that Nexus report, you also build into that resolution that annually we will look at these fees and assess a CPI. Because again, infrastructure costs more, you have inflation, things of that nature, so you have a support. So you can see here for the low density attached dwelling, which is a single individual home, for the rate structure was in 2018 was $655. So given a CPI structure that we've again adopted, you had for the rate increase for the 2019 3.03, so you come to a new rate of $675.11. So what does that mean? So when an individual comes out and says, I want to build a home, okay, we look at the impact structure for the Nexus. What is your current CPI growth rate? Here is our fee for that impact for sewer. So if you want to build a home, one individual unit, it costs you just for this structure, just for this impact fee, $675.11. Okay, that is per dwelling. So again, that comes for, you go back to the project list, and so a lot of people ask, well, how do you come up with those numbers? Why does the city of Kingsburg, Fowler, Fresno have a different number? Again, it goes back to having that Nexus report to support these numbers and say, these are our project list, this is how we came up with this number. So when you say, why does Kingsburg so high, why is it so low, why is Fowler so this, they have a supporting document and how they came up with their number, just like we have a supporting document that came up with that number. So no two cities have the same demand or report to come up with their infrastructure needs. It really has to be done on a one-on-one basis through the cities. Is there any questions regarding the Nexus report now it's developed?
When's the last time the development fees were updated?
For this project itself, or for this it was done in 2015. We've done it back in 2006, 2003, and actually so the rates actually have changed over the years because of the impacts that the report has been updated.
And it's based on what kind of factors, development fees?
Again, it's back to the projects that in the area, back to the zoning. It looks at the general plan. It looks at what development feature is going to occur, and that's how they pull in that nexus of projects, of what the cost of those projects are, and spreading it across the whole.
If we could just go back to the previous slide, please. So specifically for the sewer, those projects listed there were the ones that were counted to create the $655 fee, for example, for the single-family residential. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about what went into that before and where you would say it is compared to now, or kind of we had all talked about that a little bit?
This last Nexus was done prior to the 2016 master plan, so I haven't tried to compare the two recently, but I suspect that there's probably a number of projects that could be added to this list if we were to review the Nexus, because now we have a more comprehensive master plan as a basis to go back and insert those costs and make sure that we have a comprehensive look at it. So I recommend as a takeaway from this is that we take a look back at the Nexus specific to sewer and make sure that we've got a comprehensive number and potentially update the Nexus and fees related to that.
That kind of moves back to my points I was making. The report's a working document, right? It is an adopted document, but it's a working document. It's something that staff needs to constantly look at to say, okay, what is the future growth? Did it change? At the point in which they adopted this plan, things have changed. And we have started to look at this plan and say, okay, what is our cost factors now in today's dollars? For example, if you look at the project list WC001, what is that real dollar now today? Is it still 900,000? Is it less? Is it greater? Has the master plan for SKF changed that we no longer need that structure, or has we increased? So again, I've assessed the Nexus report and said, okay, what are these projects and where are they at? A lot of them are actually on the west side. Okay?
So a development fee to put in a new apartment building in the middle of town would be less than a development fee to put in multi-unit residential in the north side of town where there's no sewer capacity. Is that correct?
No, it's actually the same rate would go for any infrastructure. A house on the north side is the same as a house on the west or the east.
Is that a legal thing too, discrimination, illegal exposure? Because I know development fees have been a target of litigation for cities in the past. What's the grounding in that?
The grounding is basically what they do is say, okay, what is your total build at? And then they turn around in terms of that calculation. So if a house on the west side, it's assessing the projects as a whole, right? So they turn around and take that calculation and spread it around all the projects that are supposed to be assessed, and that's how you come up with that unit number. So the
So
project
it's everything.
It's
the
everything.
whole city.
Citywide, that's correct.
You have to treat everybody exactly the same. And it's just a function of the way the law is set up.
Does that allow for adequate costs to be recovered for the city if you're spreading the whole, costs of the city for all construction there for that particular project? Are they effective? Do they get the whole project paid for?
It's just an appropriate format to
impact.
do it so that it's fair, right? You're not counting the size of the lot, you're not counting the size of the home, because even when it comes to sewer system, let's say you have a 1,400 square foot house versus a 2,000 square foot house, right? Well, you're still only going to have 2 units there as far as a sewer system intake. So it's just a better way to spread it across the board so that it's even and balanced. So at the yard, it's just the calculation in which they go through. So they count up the number of units across the board. So they're thinking we're going to get 250s in that phase. The total build out, for example, Amberwood 2,000 something. They take that all into account to be able to spread those dollars across the whole city.
And I know when I got on a few years ago on the council, we were looking to grow commercially out where Starbucks is now, and we were successful in that. And the reason we were is the city lowered the impact development fees, but the city also retained a consultant for that.
Mhm.
Does the city retain a consultant to review these rates on a periodic basis?
It's not really reviewing the rates, it's really what it is, and again, I go back to what we're trying to accomplish now. The individual that actually developed this report is called, or his name is Scott Thorpe, Revenue Cost Specialist. Okay, what they do is create the Nexus report, support the document. Finance come back and say, okay, and again, what we're trying to accomplish today is that report still adequate? Because again, it's based off projects. So I can take the projects now and say, is that what we're still doing today? Is that number still realistic? What I can do is turn around and say, okay, Veronica, what is our projects nowadays? What does the master plan look like? And what I'd really like to do is actually update that master plan. So if we go back to the project list, if you can go back, Veronica, to Dan's slide, his very first slide as far as maps, please.
Rena.
I'm sorry, Rena.
Yeah, that's no problem. And I think every 5 years is probably, I need to double check on that, but I would say there's a best practice of like every 5 years updating a study like that.
That's correct. That's pretty much a rule of thumb. The reason why is because costs, yes, you're going to have inflation, but your projects may change over that period of time. So within the next report, really the only projects that are in there is the north side and the east side. The actual west side sewer line and the north side sewer line are not even in the Nexus report. So that's why I'd actually like to update the project list and make sure that we get it more accurate. Because what that tells me is we're actually not collecting enough funds. One, you build a CPI that takes account for the inflation rate of what cost of construction is. So you're building that portion in. But do you actually have all the projects? Are you accounting for too many projects now? So that's why you have to actually go through it. But let's take it on the flip side of that. When you talk about, let's say, police infrastructure or police impact fee, that number is not going to be as fluid because your project list doesn't really change. Okay? So, but the sewer line, it does need to be updated and assessed because projects do really change.
And the difference between the project list and a capital improvement list?
Pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
It's just talking about projects, it's talking about infrastructure.
And
So-
you got to be, pardon me, just one more thing. And the project costs, you got to be pretty accurate with, because if it would come down to litigation, you need to justify those costs that you base those development fees on. Is that correct?
You're required to have a rough nexus. You don't have to be precise.
And that would be performed by the
These are best
engineer, someone
estimates.
qualified to do the nexus.
Well, what we would do is actually take the master plan from SKF and try to incorporate that structure because they've already done that.
So there'd be a basis for those project costs.
Correct. There's got to be some kind of nexus between the two. Obviously, project costs are assumptions, what's the market doing, things like that. They factor all that in to come up with those numbers. Okay?
So we're talking in regards to development impact fees, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so can you walk me through, so this development and impact fee, just a couple of questions real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been implementing these,
We have.
but we've been shortage or we haven't had it updated.
Well,
version
there's
of
been
what
some
we-
conversations, and I've looked through the records on how these fees were talked about. At some point, council would say, we prefer to encourage development by decreasing those fees and not really taking the full impact of what they want. So every time you have that report come to council, you have that conversation. Because
And
you're going to have,
how many times do you bring that to the council?
every time it's going to be updated.
Every time it's going to be updated?
So every 5 years.
So let's go from 2010 to now.
Okay?
Yeah, were there impact fees in 2010?
Yes, there was.
Okay, so walk me through this impact fee. This impact fee gets generated through developers and whoever wants to build. Goes
Mhm.
into a fund.
Mhm.
Okay, what fund number is that?
Each fund number for the impact structures, they start at 400.
Uh-huh.
They're, I want to say between 400 and 411 are the impact funds.
So those 400 to 411, is that one for police, one for fire?
That's
one
correct.
for-
So the
one for
impact,
sewer?
the impact fee structures that we currently have, we have police, fire, streets, storm drain, wastewater, general facilities, public,
So-
parks, and the last one is open space.
Okay, so when you break that money down and it goes into that pot,
Mm-hmm.
and you set it apart through 400 through 412,
Mm-hmm.
how do you determine what percentage goes to who?
The percentage itself is not, it's more of what is the demand for the project. So
Okay.
again,
Demand.
let's say.
So it's demand.
It really is. It's what you can do is pretty much come in with projects and apply it to a different one. For example,
Who creates the demand? Ex council? And I ask you this because I'm following through with your.
it really comes down to what are the needs of the department heads and what's going on. Again,
So demand and needs
demand and needs,
through
correct.
department heads.
Mhm.
That's where a CIP would be helpful.
Okay. So I'm just learning.
Yeah.
So it's demand, needs, and department heads.
Mhm.
So, and we have 7 factored or 9 factored in, police, fire.
Correct.
Okay. So through 2010 to now, we've had a certain amount of money go into that pot.
Correct.
And then it goes, you guys sit down and have a meeting and hey, you know what? There's a need here, there's a need there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any money is there any of that money that is precluded that it cannot go to something specific?
A good example of that is actually the sewer system, right?
Mhm.
The sewer impact fee.
Mhm.
When you have a project list, it has to go to those particular projects.
You said sewer impact fees, that's not part of this, that part of not this impact fee?
It is. Well, it's called wastewater
Okay.
sewer, same
Okay,
thing.
okay.
Okay? So I say wastewater because within the report they call it wastewater. So the sewer slash wastewater system, it has to be going to the projects that are identified within that report. And that goes the same for all projects. All projects all impact fees have to be identified for a project within that report.
So when you sit there with the city staff and you find out that it's part of the demand, the need, and the department head, does your department heads factor and talk to the SKF also? No.
Not when it comes to impact fees, no.
Not to impact fees?
No.
Okay. And,
Again, they have their own rate
They have their
structure and
own
we
rate.
have ours.
no, I'm just asking this because at the end of the day, we as the council are trying to figure out a way to make sure we fund and take care of our
Correct.
infrastructure.
I understand.
So then you guys sit down and you guys have a meeting, and you guys have a meeting, you guys have your own guidelines that you guys hear, and then you guys set the money out, correct?
Correct. So, for example, if there is an issue, we can go back through the Nexus report, which we do regularly, if something occurs, and say, okay, we have this project with the Nexus report, but this is how much we have. What can we
And-
do with that?
And to this date, there'll always be 400 through 412 accounting. So
Well, there's actually, in the prior years, there was actually less.
Mhm.
So again, you go through the Nexus report, you go through actually what the state is allowing too as well,
Mhm.
as far as impact reports, and you can build on that. For example, I think in the past, they didn't even have parks, or they didn't have sewer.
you can just
So
yeah,
as the next reports go updated and as you actually start assessing each 5 years, you say, okay, what is allowable? What are the needs of the city?
okay.
Okay.
Development fees are also a way the city competes with other cities, right? Lower development fees, more attractive city looks.
A
So
developer would say that,
always have
yes.
to keep that in mind as well, right?
A developer,
Market
and again,
forces.
coming back to council, you'll have
Real
that
world stuff.
conversation.
Yeah. So you
because
couldn't
the-
charge development fees that were, just outrageous.
No,
If you didn't want your city to
legally, you
grow.
couldn't charge. Again, a city can't charge more than actually its cost recovery. So you have to have that supporting document to say, okay, for me to have this impact fee, the current rate is going to be $600, right?
So-
You could charge less, but you can never charge greater than.
So going with that same concept, the city cannot charge as much as they can, and they can also spend that money on just different things.
That's correct.
So you can't just spend $300,000 on a consultant just because, it's in any other.
And it doesn't
project.
pertain to any
It
other
doesn't
project. You
pertain
could
to that
not do that.
project,
That's
correct?
correct.
You can't just pay, you can't just collect $6 million to put a sewer line in.
That's correct. So a good example of the impact fee structure and how we city has utilized it is the PD station and the fire remodel that went through that process. Those are projects within that report that we could utilize those funds for services, engineering, things of that nature to get those projects to fruition.
Okay.
Okay. I will now turn it on to Eric Scriven. He'll go through a couple slides on additional funds.
Good morning. I'm thinking about this, and I think we have an issue because we don't have kind of the situation that SKF has with their wastewater treatment plant, as an example. They have capacity right now that when someone wants to hook up and use some of that capacity, they're going to charge that builder or developer who's going to pay for that capacity and an impact fee. They're going to hook them up, they're good to go, and they're going to collect the capacity fee, put it in the pot, and they're staying ahead. They always have a pot of money that when they need to increase the size of the treatment plant, as an example, they're ahead of the curve, if you will, and they can increase the size of that treatment plant when it makes sense to, because they've collected a pot of money that they've got on hand. We don't have a pot of money for, let's call it, Dinuba on the north side. So that's the conundrum we're in right now, where if we could, if you will, inject some money that we had on hand to put that line in, we could get, sort of, and redevelopment used to be used for this purpose as well, where you get the line in, then you start getting the development, and it replenishes your fund. You got the line in, you got the development happening, and then they start connecting and paying impact fees, and it replenishes your fund. Then you use that money for the next project. You stay ahead on all of your sort of growth area projects. So that just occurred to me when they were talking about the SKF treatment plant, and they've got capacity, but they also are collecting fees, and they're going to just stay ahead, leapfrogging and stay ahead. That's what you would like to do, and that's called pay-go funding. So a couple of concepts on financing. I think it's been covered, but we all know Prop 218, which is you can't charge the developer for anything beyond what they're using, if you will. You can't charge them, say, to repair all the red lines in the downtown. It's strictly related to the project that they're doing, the impacts that they're causing. So the other concept I just went over is pay-go funding is ideal. I mean, you have a pot of money, or you sort of stay ahead of the curve. These costs are typically funded by impact fees established by the city. Ideally, impact fee account balances are sufficient to stay ahead of new development and fund improvements with future phases of development, replenishing fund balances for the next series of infrastructure needs. However, like Selma and most California cities, these balances are not sufficient to stay ahead of development. For communities that are mature and do not have consistent new development, impact fees are not a significant part of the funding alternatives. Thus, when major infrastructure is required, alternative funding sources are necessary. So we're also going to talk about the evaluation of the funding amount and the timing of that need factors in to sort of the ability to solve this financing gap that we have on these outlying growth areas, with the exception of Amberwood, actually, because it sounds like that funding gap is taken care of by the developer.
And if I can expand on that as well, too. Again, this report is built for a reason. It's got a rhyme or reason as far as trying to assess future growth. So as growth occurs, you can continue to expand. But when you start to have projects where you're either cutting the fee down, reducing the fee, or just waiving the fee, now you're affecting the impacts of the future growth. So just keep that in mind too when a developer or individual or anybody wants to talk about, well, my impact fee is too high, can I cut it, can I waive it? Yes, you'll get those projects in, but you got to keep in mind there is a ramification for future projects. Okay?
It's cut the, if you don't have as much in your impact fee account for that project, or to stay ahead for the future projects over a period of years, perhaps that's what's happened here. You've gotten to the point where you're behind and you're having to scramble for funding, say the Danuba line, to stay ahead and get that developer to hook in and then replenish with impact fees when they develop. And then you just keep moving forward. That's why development was really helpful back in the day, but we know that's gone. So just a sort of an additional concept at the bottom, Amberwood's a great example. These AB 1600 studies often identify costs that are outdated by the time fee schedules are approved. We've discussed that a bit. Funding the total infrastructure costs are often not possible from existing development fees when they get outdated or things change. For master plan developments like Amberwood, requiring a development agreement, city has the power to require additional funding from the developer to cover the shortfall. You really have a big project like Amberwood, and you can sort of really define the cost and their specific project. So you could have charged fees, and I think instead they're going to just install the infrastructure in this instance. But there will be a reimbursement agreement to the extent they're oversizing it. So, all right, next page.
Sorry, to kind of touch base, he's talked about the fees and structures and them being charged. When it comes to the fees as well, you got to assess how the structures are done and reassess them, and going back to, these studies and how they work. Yes, we talked about addressing these fees, but the reason it takes 5 years to reassess these fees is it's costly. The last report is very costly. And to give you an understanding, I've looked into the cost of updating these fees, because I would like to do that to get them where they need to be. Just to update the sewer impact fee, it'll be about $10,000. Okay? And that's a small report. You saw how many projects were in there. It wasn't very large. So to go through a full Nexus report, a study every couple of years is very costly. That's why you assess it on a 5-year basis. But in this instance, you really want to start getting it back to where it needs to be.
For all the impact fees to assess all the
I
impact.
didn't get that cost factor. I'm sorry.
But it could be upwards $250,000, $300,000.
A couple $100,000. It could be. Yeah. Again, I'm just throwing a number out there. The sewer one is a small component of the overall, because it's a large study. Think about parks, right? What does it cost to take a park? You got to get all those cost factors, pull all together. What are the regulations as far as what do you want to build? Where does it go? And all those things. It's a lot of work. It's labor intensive.
But that's why it's important that we're sitting here and gathering information, because it takes money to make money.
Correct. I agree.
And with us always wanting to pass the buck, we end up in this position where we actually don't have any money to take care of the future.
Correct. Or we're
So at one point in time, we're going to have to be disciplined and do our due diligence and stick with a plan.
I agree.
I think it comes down to priorities too, because it seems to me, and we're pressed for time, but we get things done based on just urgency. And we've had public safety as a really, really urgent matter that we focused on for the last few years. And we're getting that taken care of in terms of personnel and the new station. And now we're moving on to our next really, really urgent item, So there's so many things the city needs to do. Oftentimes, either there's a really urgent item or it's made into looking like a really urgent item, and could be a little bit of a mix of the both. But that's what I've seen, and I think the infrastructure is a really urgent item that we're looking at and dealing with things like this, and impact fees are a major component.
No problem.
You know, we're talking about to update it, the fee to update it. Like our sewer, you said you had 600 and 600 and a half $1,000 out there.
Mm-hmm.
You can use that money, 10,000 out of that to update the fee, or it can't be used?
They actually can, yes.
Okay. So each impact fee can pay for its own update?
In this case, it could. There's a line item in there that says project list or something to that extent. I inquired with the individual to confirm that I could do that, and actually, yes, I could.
All right, thank you.
The first bullet on the top there is a little bit of overlap again. Isaac and I sort of covering the same items to the extent, you have to ask these questions just to make sure you're covering the full cost, and when you're reviewing a larger project, for instance, I mean, the impact fees that you have on the books makes it easy for someone to know what they're going to have to pay when they walk in the door, particularly for smaller projects. But the objective is always, say, a project like Amberwood or even potentially Raven, larger projects, you're never going to want to be left holding the bag with a deficit. So you're going to give that close scrutiny, probably at a level deeper than the impact fee on the book. You just want to make sure that you're not in a deficit position.
Switch you out. Sorry.
And the best way to do that is just have the developer pay for the improvements, and then you know that it's been done. And it's in the ground, and reimbursement agreements.
And oftentimes the developer can get these improvements done cheaper than the city, right?
Perhaps, yeah. Yeah, I think so. So what we're talking about is funding a gap here. And it's really not rocket science in the sense that the money's got to come from somewhere. It's new development, so it's benefiting private parties. So by law, it's not going to come from the existing residents. It's going to come from the new properties where you're expanding infrastructure and services, for that matter, as well. They're going to pay their way. The existing residents aren't going to pay for the new residents' costs. So a geo bond, for example, or parcel tax that's citywide, any kind of financing, it's going to be specific to the new development. And that new development usually is that parcel is owned by one party, a developer, so they can vote to tax themselves if that's the method that they want to use. Is the financing, or they can use their cash. Or you can find there are some other ideas, and I just threw a couple on the page here at the very bottom. But I think the point to be stressed, which has been stressed several times already, so I'm not going to belabor it, is that we have a shortfall. We don't have money. Cash, which that's the first choice. If you had cash, you had fund balances sufficient to sort of stay ahead in your impact fee accounts. If you had those cash dollars, you could use that. So I would consider that sort of internal financing of these projects.
So the RDA, one of its geniuses was you had this money and you could loan it, right? You could loan it out at low areas of it, and that's not a gift of public funds, which is, like you said, illegal to have taxpayers fund these developments. But if we did have the cash, or the existing cash the city has, the city could, in theory, loan this.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your statement.
I started with the RDA. That was the city could fund these projects and loan the money out at low interest rates.
Actually, it installed these improvements many times. It would just install it because RDA was an economic development engine, and then these properties would develop with $400,000, $200,000 houses, and that would increase the tax increment for the RDA, and that would be used to sort of continue to prime the pump for growth.
Bring more money
and
in
more
based on the
infrastructure.
increase in value.
That's why, many times redevelopment would increase property tax base and as well create sales tax and jobs for communities, so.
Back
But
to
that's
the
no more.
present, these improvement districts are not gifts of public funds. They're fully legal, and that's
Which ones?
the improvement districts, the Melrose type of financing that you're
The Melrose
talking about.
district is a property owner base, so it's a special tax on the land itself. It's a private security. There's no debt
Is there a
related to the
public
city.
vote required for that?
A vote of the property owners.
Just the property owners,
That's
not the
correct.
city, just the affected area, like you were saying, it
Correct.
only affects the end users in that area.
It's a special tax, yeah.
Okay.
For that specific area, and you create boundaries. So that's a community facilities district, a CFD. And we tried one on the north side, and we had the largest property owner at the end of the day was not interested in voting to put a tax on his property, so we didn't proceed, so. So internal is what, say, SKF is doing. It's also called PAYGO financing, and they just continue to make improvements, and then the impact fees come in from the benefiting when people hook up, and they replenish their fund, and then just repeat that process. That would be the ideal. So, the external funding approach, there's really just a couple, which is, the developer. Either they have bank loans or equity and install, like Amberwood is going to do these improvements themselves. And to the extent they've oversized it, there's a reimbursement agreement from other future developers after them that can reimburse them for installing it. So you've used their money to install the improvements. Or there's also forms of financing we just discussed, CFD.
Is the time value of money taken into account when it comes to reimbursing developers? Like if you paid in 2010 money, that money's worth a little more later.
Usually they're going to want that in their reimbursement agreement because they're paying interest on the money that they put the infrastructure in, but that's usually the way those work, but that's a negotiation. And, the CFD, I'm glad to get into that more deeply, but I think for the purposes of this meeting, it's just important to know that it's based on the property owners that are benefiting from the improvements, and they vote to tax themselves that special tax that is used for repayment of debt that is used to finance the installation of improvements. That special tax that they voted to place on their properties has, the city has no obligation, the other taxpayers in the city have no obligation to pay that. If the property owners don't pay their special tax, which is on the property tax bill, if they don't pay their special tax, then they're subject to foreclosure on their property. It's like a mortgage, but it's in a better position than a mortgage. It's right there with the property taxes themselves. So it's a pretty well known. The last 40 years, Neil, probably 40 years since Prop 13 in '78. Started in 1982. There's thousands and thousands of CFDs that have been issued in the state of California over the last 30, 40 years. So it's a well-known form. There are some credit criteria we have at the City of Selma when we went through the process several years ago for the North Side Sewer, put in some policies and procedures for the City of Selma, and you have those on the books just to make sure that the credit quality of any type of CFD to finance this type of infrastructure would be of sufficient credit quality that it wouldn't cause problems for the city in the sense that you have to manage it and oversee it, and you don't want headaches from these if they're kind of on the edge of being too aggressive. So there's reasons why the city wants to oversee it and make sure that it's done well, but that's a well-known way of financing. There are some other types of financing. You can get some grant monies, and those are out there as well. But and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, the enhanced infrastructure financing districts, the EIFDs. Some folks use that as a funding source, that funding source will take time to build up and really only makes sense from my point of view if you can get the county to contribute their portion of the tax increment as well. But there are some other ideas. But the CFD funding mechanism, or using the developer's money, or perhaps borrowing internally from, I hesitate to even bring it up, but we're trying to discuss all options. Internally borrowing maybe other impact fee funds that you're going to reimburse those impact fee funds back to the, for the a sewer project just because you're short on funding. Those are approaches that other cities have done. And I don't not necessarily recommend that last one. It depends on the circumstances and
Theoretically, you could transfer from one account to another, and the city could say, "We promise to pay that fund back."
Yeah, but some cities have
interest.
gotten in trouble where they haven't been able to pay it back
The economy
in
goes south,
in a
and
good
they don't have the
time
money.
frame. So, but feel compelled to bring that up, but it's not something it's case by case.
When you do a debt structure in that sense, or a loan, you got to remember you're basing that off of future growth as well, because you're basically taking an impact fee and reimbursing an impact fee. So if you're not getting that steady increment, you can see that you're depleting those impact fees. You're not able to get back into that loan and get those agreements back in place. So, and again, it's not as simple as, well, let's go borrow. You actually got to take council action. You got to create a financing plan. You got to create financing rates. So it's not as simple as let's just transfer.
Well, that's just the thing about us not being able, the city can't just put the sewer line in itself. For one, we don't have the money. And two, even if we did, what's to say that the economy couldn't go south and the developers say, hey, I don't have the money right now. The business conditions are bad. I'm not putting in these houses. And then the city's left holding the bag with all this taxpayer money it used to put in a sewer line that's useless. So we really have to have that interplay, that public-private.
There's no security there.
Not recommended, that last, yeah. I would never recommend doing that. So that's the presentation. Want to keep it fairly high level. As far as internal funding, pay-go, that's really not an option right now based on the financials that I'm seeing with the city. I think the impact fee is $667,000 for these types of projects, and so that's not sufficient.
Percentage.
So
we haven't heard,
like
we've
what
heard
you've
from
done.
everybody, but we haven't, and thank you for that, Eric. Really great presentation on financing. We just touched on it, grants and getting money from our government representatives. So, Jason, would you like to expand on that?
Sure. And Richard wasn't able to be here from Townsend on the grant side, but Teresa and I will be talking with him, giving him an update as well. We are looking at and continuing our discussions from our meetings before with elected officials to see what might be out there on the federal side and also on the state side. I can't go into too much detail about that right now because we're still in the proposal process with them, showing them some of the issues that we're having and trying to find a way that we can bring some of that bacon home. But I know we've got a lot of projects, and it was very informative. Thank you for inviting me to this, to see all the different projects that are going on and all the stuff that the red lines that we were talking about, what need to be addressed. And from my perspective, those are ones that I think elected officials are going to want to hear about and continue to understand what those are and how we can come to some sort of conclusion and figure out how to get some of that stuff funded to figure out.
How's the state looking this year in terms of money for these types of projects?
It's always something I'm not going to be able to tell you here at an open meeting because it's all conjecture right now. We've been involved and have briefed Senator Hurtado's office. Assemblyman Arambula is coming to town in a couple weeks here, so we're going to have some time to sit down with him. I've talked to his chief of staff extensively, and actually I invited Gilbert from TJ Cox's office. I told him we're over here at a public meeting, come on over, and he texted me that he couldn't make it, but he wants me to stop by afterwards. So I'm going to go talk to him and tell him what you guys have informed me about today, and I'll encourage him to watch the tape too, so he can get a firsthand understanding of it. But we're pushing hard with all levels of government here with them, just to let them know what our needs are, and want to make sure that we're heard and we can get something done.
Well, thank you for that, Jason. Before we wrap up, we have someone here. We've been talking about public-private and development in the north side and the different sides, and we have one of those developers, one of those pieces of the puzzle right here, Larry Raven. And I'm hopeful that Larry could address us and give us his thoughts on this morning's presentation.
Hi, I'm Larry Raven, and I've been involved on that North Dinuba line for 16, 20 years. Financing, of course, is our major problem, as you all discussed today. My concern is some of the numbers I hear 1 week or a month ago change again, constantly changing. We really need to get this narrowed down. We got a bid on that full line up to Dockery from Johnson Engineers at about $5.3 million. Talking to Veronica a few months back, she indicated that we can go from a 27 to a 24 to an 18, narrow it down as we go east. In your papers today, it appears that we're going 27-inch all the way, which of course affects the dollar bottom line. In my evaluation since 2010, things change. As a developer, we really cannot rely on anything that's said. They tell us one thing, we get up to that point, it's a major change, and maybe we have a new group, and maybe your word's good that I could go to the bank and do something. Right now, I don't have the confidence in the City of Selma telling me what I can do or what I can't do. They're very good at telling me what I can't do. And if it's a direct change from what I've been told a few months or even a year earlier, we can't rely on that. And I think that's a real bummer. And I'm not going to speak for the other developers, but I have a feeling it'd roughly be the same. I think we still have room. I built a 12-inch line for probably a mile or more going up Ditch Road and up to the point that we were told to build a 12-inch line up to Dockery, which I did. We have two subdivisions that were approved in 2008. The only reason I'm telling you this, see, we have new people that were not around at that time. 2008, we got involved with a lawsuit with Consolidated Irrigation District, and that put the brakes on everything on the north end. That has been settled some 8 to 10 years later. During that time, in 2008, with the City Council approved our map of like 157 units. RJ was approved for 100 and some units. Both of us had will serve letters. So we were moving forward. What stopped us then was the CID lawsuit, which took several years. So we were at a standstill. And the projects elsewhere around the city, it's basically cities looked upon by others as a stagnant city. Nothing has happened in all of these years. So we were following the SKF sewer booklet, which I have, and some of you may have seen it. That was in 2006. We followed it to the T up to Dinuba Avenue. Then the lawsuit started. Everything changed. We were progressing or going forward, and then in 2016, SKF said, no, you can't go forward anymore. We want a 27-inch sewer line put in. Okay, that was 100% different than what I was led to believe and performed and put in the sewer up to Dockery and Dinuba. So we couldn't go any further. The 12-inch sewer line that we put in was designed and approved by the city council, by the planning director, prior planning director. The council could not approve my plan or RJ's plan if we didn't have sewer availability at our properties. And that stands true today. By the time we got ready to pull permits, SKF and some with the city said, no, we want to go 27-inch line. It's real difficult, been very difficult for me. I'm sitting on these properties. I bought RJ subdivision, the map and the property, with the idea he had a will serve letter. We were going forward, and then we're stopped. All of our plans and money was to move forward. I'm still in a position, I think there's room in that 12-inch line. We may have to hire an outside engineer to comply or work with the sewer district. Was the district wrong or saying we could go with that 12-inch? And or is it a possibility there is room for me to feed those two subdivisions, which would put a few million in the city's bank through impact fees, and then we could go and do the 27-inch line. That may be something to think about as raising money. If you don't build houses, if there's not rooftops, it's tough to get more commercial business. They hire people year-round, increases your tax income by a tremendous amount, not only from the rooftops, but from sales tax. I look at this, the cities, I always say this, but I'm a developer and I'm biased. You've got to run a city as a business. If you invest a few $1 million here and there, and the northeast area minimum, as it develops the next few years, will return the city in excess of $40 million. You could do a lot with that. New subdivisions, as you saw on the map up there was no red lines. We put in close to 1,000 homes. There's no red lines. The police don't have to patrol our districts. So the new subdivisions is 100% for your benefit. Usually they always say developers don't pay their own way. That's crazy. And I think most of you understand that. So I think we could still partner either through a direct loan. I could sign it, you could sign it. That may benefit. I'd be half responsible. But we had a line, and I think I could still get it, a loan from one of the banks I deal with. If the city would sign on it, absolutely sure the bank would loan me the money or loan us somebody. If you don't start building, you know, Kingsburg's still moving, Fowler is still moving, you're not here. So I think look at it more as a business venture. It's not going to cost you anything, it's just going to bring in more dollars. So the numbers can't continue changing. We got a bid from Lloyd Johnson's company to go up to Dockery at 5.3 mil. And that's prevailing wage. So if you could work with me and or our competitor, if and when they start, there's a possibility for another $500 to $1 million to extend the Dinuba line and let the developers to the east at least tie on for a few hundred houses. And you don't need that amber line all the way. But you do need some new houses. Houses are going to make you money. So I think a little more cooperation, we can all still do it. So I find this morning's meeting interesting. I think one-on-one or a few of us sit down and hammer out details would help. I think your friendly attorney over there had it down pat with the funding at one time, and I kind of screwed that up. But maybe we'll look at that again. So I think we have some options, and I'd like to see us go forward with it. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments, Larry. So with that, we'll bring it back. City Manager, we've come to the end of our presentation. Did you want to make any closing remarks? And we can bring it back if council wants to make any.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and thank you for everybody participating. I know it was a lot of preparation and time out of your schedule, so thank you for sharing all of this information. Very valuable. Some of the takeaways that I saw that I made note of, and I'd like to hear from Council what things you had, but what I heard was we need to work on a capital improvement plan. That is one of the takeaways from this. Another was, and I know Dan's going to follow up on this for you, can we use CDBG for infrastructure expansion? And the other is looking at updating our impact fees, specifically for sewer, but maybe for all impact fees for expansion development. And then I do believe that the CFD, when you were all creating the CFD for the Dinuba expansion, that there's some policies in place that maybe we can dust off. So if a developer wants to go that route, we are ready, you know, and we can facilitate that more expeditiously. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Mayor and Council for your feedback.
Does council, would anyone like to make a closing remark? Start with Councilman Trillo.
First of all, I'd like to thank Veronica and Trish. I'd like to thank you guys for coming and doing a good presentation. Just as I spoke earlier, prior to getting on the council, I did have some innuendos and thoughts, and I think this has cleared up a lot of information. And like the mayor stated, there was some information that we probably, the red lines were just had to halt and to stop, and you know, it's clarified some information, and that's also given us the opportunity to give you everyone, and I thank all the staff, and I thank Jason, Eric, the city manager, and Kyra. I thank you guys all for participating, and I thank the city attorney for coming, city manager for doing all this. This is really good. It was really well prepared, and I thank you guys because this not only gives you the ability to understand how we feel as a council, and we are pro growth. We are. And just hopefully this will actually start, it's a new beginning, something where we could actually set the tone, and set the tone that our staff doesn't need to look at options. We have all the options in the world. SKF is part of our partners, and we value them. And I'm hoping that through this, we're able to become more productive and lay the groundwork where we can really do something this year. So thank you.
you know, like, once again, like Johnny says, we thank everybody that comes here, you know, especially the workshop today. And we also, I thank Larry and Penny today coming up, one of the developers here, put their input, and we need to hear that. It's okay, it's good. And Chris Com, you know, Eric, Isaac, of course, Kevin, Daniel, and Teresa, Monica, Teresa, our attorney, and our city councilor. I thank them. You know, today is how would I say it, a learning for everybody here to know what direction. What's good about it today is in the past, we're coming out of the recession now, actually our city's now moving forward. Every city, actually in the valley, actually not just our city, but in the state of California, we are getting out of this recession that we were in. We're in this Trump. It caused issues in every city. We lost our RDA and all those issues that was factored into the deal. But now we're moving forward in a positive direction, and the developers are coming forward and willing to spend their money and create the economic development for cities. And we should look at these avenues to help assist them and also work together as partnerships, because working together we get things done. And we come to the table with different differences, but that's okay. When at the end of the table, we're halfway, where everybody's happy and leaves everybody, we're good. And that's what we're at today. But
Okay, I would like to say again, this is, reiterate to everyone, thank you for all your time. This was very informative. And what we gathered today, or what I gathered, is, you know, for the past 10 years or so, you know, we just probably didn't, as a city, look at how we could continue to develop or continue to have some of these funds reserved for situations that have already come up. This is now problems that we're trying to fix and move forward. So to go back and say, wow, this happened 10 years ago, you know, we got to find a solution now. And for Mr. Raven as a business and a developer, it's very frustrating to hear that this is what happened to you. You know, we've heard that in the past, that this is what developers have mentioned. They don't like working with Selma. Selma doesn't know what they're doing. Well, I think today's council is a different council from 10 years ago. And we want to work with all our developers. We want them to have a good experience with Selma, because we want to be known that we can work with developers. And I want to do probably as much as our colleagues here sitting with us tonight or today. We want to work diligently, and we want to work professionally with you folks. We don't want to turn away business. We want good business growth here. And bringing in homes is a priority. So I'd like to do what we can to see where we can partner to get this project moving forward, because we have people right now that want to move to Selma. I have 5 clients that want to move to Selma. They want to build a home here. And I'm telling them, hold on, it's coming, it's coming. I've been saying that for almost over a year and a half. It's not, I mean, when is it coming? So those are the things that I'm going to, for the next year, is definitely look at our growth, look at our developers, and want to make sure that they are being treated fairly, they're treated respectfully, and when they have a question, we need to get those answers. So.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
You know, like the rest of us, I appreciate everybody putting the effort to be out here. And I agree with a lot of the words that actually Councilwoman Sarah said. We all want quality homes in Selma, and we've all wanted them for years. So we know what we want. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We've talked and talked and talked, but yet we're still in the same situation. So what I'm hoping is come out here is better communication, kind of like what John Trio said, Councilman Trio. We want to move forward. We want to hit, whether you call it the reset button, and whatever lack of communication we had in the past, we want to fix that to make sure that we're on the same page to move forward. But the key word, move forward. Okay, I don't want not only to know what our issue is, I want us to work together to figure out a way to repair those issues. And then on a more specific note, Veronica, hopefully you can update the city manager on I'm just really curious about your CIP plan in regards to Selma, how we've been performing on that over the life of it. I'd like that, and just stress that we are a team and we do need to work together. And with that, I have nothing else to say.
And then I want to say thank you to everybody for coming out and they're spending their valuable time here. I think it was really important because you don't want to spend your time like you don't want to spend your money without return. And I think we're going to get a lot of return from today because I think you're hearing from everybody that it's time to move. It's time to go forward. And Mr. Raven brought up something really important saying, hey, Selma gives me 10 reasons why I can't do my development. Let's give him a reason and the other developers a way he can. Let's find a way to do this, to get to these homes being built. I mean, we all want this. Now it's a way of getting together and working as a team to do it. The impact fees, we have to look at that, creative ways of financing. It was really instructive to find out that, Selma is open for business, in terms of infill projects, that sewer is not as critical a factor there as it is in putting the sewer in the northeast and west ends. So let's focus on that. Let's get that done. Let's work as a team. Let's stay in touch on this. Let's constantly communicate about it. I think Mr. Raven, Mrs. Raven need to have a meeting with the attorney and council members and our city manager about resuscitating some of the financial plans that were gone over, creative ways of financing his development, which he sounds like he's ready to revisit along with his bank again. So let's keep doing that and let's stay in touch, and I'll stay on the same page here. And with that, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for coming out today. Did anybody else have anything to say before we adjourn? Okay, with that, we're adjourned.